Hello, everyone. This is Laura Young with the CPAN team here at UT Tyler Health Science Center, and I have started the recording for today's session. We have with us Dr. Jamin Blood, who will be presenting the holistic approach to the psychiatric patient. My name is Laura Young, and I am the program manager for our team here. And we're excited to be able to share this information with you today. And at the end of today's session, we'll have some time for Q&A, and we'll take questions then. If you have questions that you think of during today's session, please go ahead and put those in the chat box, and we'll go ahead and keep track of those so we can answer those towards the end of today's session. Dr. Blood, how are you doing? Are you ready to go here today?
I'm ready.
All right, great. Thank you. I will turn over the sharing to you and let you share your screen.
Give me 1 second, just making sure I got the right one.
Not a problem.
There we go.
Yeah,
Y'all
there you
seeing
go.
me now? All right.
Yep, looks good.
All right. So this is the title of my presentation today. She said the holistic approach to the psychiatric patient. Here's a learning objective. So we're going to evaluate how the holistic principles apply to mental health treatment, how to implement these principles in your practice, and then develop plans for mental health self-treatment. I don't have any disclosures. All right, so I wanted to start off with some statistics. So I got these from NAMI, the National Mental Health Alliance, and to show you the impact that mental health has, not only from the world. We'll start at the bottom and actually go up top. So depression, anxiety disorders cost the global economy $1 trillion in lost productivity each year. I believe these statistics are a couple years old. For the world one, so it potentially could be even more now. As far as on the community, if you look at the emergency department, 1 out of 8 visits for adults is a mental health condition or substance use. Mood disorders are the most common cause of hospitalization for U.S. people under age 45, excluding pregnancy and birth. As far as on the family, the impact on the family. So 8.4 million people in the US provide care to an adult with a mental or emotional health problem. And those people are providing about 32 hours per week of unpaid care. As far as the impact on the person, 32% of US adults have mental illness. Rate of unemployment is higher among those who have mental illness. High school students with significant symptoms of depression are more than twice as likely to drop out of high school compared to their peers, or 3 times more likely to repeat a grade. So it's pretty significant impacts that mental health can have on those around us or ourselves. And so I want to start off with this statement. We can't focus only on neurotransmitters when diagnosing and treating mental health. We also have to look at each patient's past experiences, physical health, and the socioeconomic, cultural, and spiritual issues that are affecting him or her. And this is from William Resch. All right, so we're going to kind of cover a holistic approach, which is the person is a unit of mind, body, and spirit. And we're going to go into the specifics of these and how these all interact. So we're going to go off with the body first. So the medications, that's just part of the comprehensive whole patient approach. I'm not going to really get into medications today, but they are vital for certain conditions. Like if someone's having a manic episode or a psychotic break, they're very important at those times. But they're not always needed in mild to moderate anxiety and depression, you don't have to start with a medication, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. What I do want to highlight is the TAD study. That was a treatment of adolescent depression. And so that was a study that compared fluoxetine, also called Prozac, versus CBT or in combined treatment. And so what we learned is from after the first 8 weeks is that fluoxetine did better than CBT. But after 16 weeks, they were about the same. And then at 36 weeks later, CBT had superior effects. So what we learned from that, if we kind of look at the global picture, is that fluoxetine helped patients get better a little bit faster, but then once the medication had its effect, that's when the skills of CBT started taking over and actually had superior outcomes than CBT or fluoxetine alone. So they did a fluoxetine alone arm, a combined arm, and a CBT alone arm, and that's kind of the overall results from what sorry, I jumped way too far. Is so that shows the overall that how medications versus CBT or a combination of CBT can be very helpful for patients. Just in my practice, seeing patients a lot, medication alone can have benefits, but oftentimes they really do need the skills that they learn in therapy. They need that time to be able to reflect on their past and to reflect on their moments of where they're having their struggles and difficulties, and then plan to how to change the future. So it is very important to help patients understand the need for therapy. But I also wanted to throw in a case that I had recently about hormones. So I had a 16-year-old male come in with Klinefelters. He had all the symptoms of major depression, met criteria for major depressive. And the mom was like, oh yeah, by the way, he's going to be starting testosterone here in a week. So it's like, all right, well, let's not do any medications now. Let's see what just the testosterone treatments do. So I saw him several weeks later, and he was doing much, much better. Didn't meet criteria for major depressive disorder. Was very happy with the way things were going. So we got a rule. We have to make sure we're looking at all the aspects. If mom hadn't told me about the hormone treatment, who knows where we would have ended up. So we just keep in mind that there are several aspects that we need to look at. All right, so another thing for the body is it is very critical that these kids are getting some physical activity. It's getting harder and harder for, I would say, a lot of kids with all the electronics access that we have now to get them out and to be more physically active. I know there's going to be the subset of kids that are very involved in sports and activities, but then you have the other subset that are very driven by the electronics games. Professional gaming has become a significant sport, and so kids are now wanting to go, oh, I want to go into that, but then they're not getting as much physical activity as they should be. We've known since the 80s that there's a definite component, definite link between physical activity and depressive symptoms. And now there are even more studies showing the benefit of physical activity on mental health. There's been studies which I'll point out in a little bit about specifically related to anxiety, but there's been lots of other ones that relate depression, with bipolar, even schizophrenia. So it's very important that we should be recommending that. Sorry, I have adults, but it should be just the general population be at least 30 minutes of accumulated moderate intensity physical activity most days of the week. And so Merriweather and his colleagues came up with these key principles for physical activity. They are: one, that the more activity, the better. Number two is accumulated time is more important than intensity. Number three is activity can be accumulated in 10-minute increments. Four is lifestyle activities, such as substituting walking or biking for a short car ride, using a push mower rather than lighting mower, taking the stairs as opposed to the elevator, that these lifestyle activity changes are more likely to be sustainable than structured activities such as exercising at a gym. So those are things that we need to be educating our patients on, especially these kids who really just want to focus on their electronics. And trust me, I have many of them that their parents are always struggling to get them off of their electronics. But here's a few of these studies. So let's do the top right one, the physical activity interventions for people with mental illness. So this was one, a study that was aimed at patients with schizophrenia. And so what it showed was that this meta-analysis had a large effect on physical activity on depressive symptoms of people with schizophrenia. And so they may be even the hardest subset of population to get into treatment, but that's where we can talk about their quality of life and how yeah, maybe they don't want to take medications, but hey, maybe they want to feel better in this area or that area, and we can be helping them treat the whole global picture instead of just these symptoms of schizophrenia. This top left one, the examination of the ancillary effect of exercise in people with anxiety and stress related disorders. That was also another meta-analysis. What that showed was that people with significant mental illness, so significant mental illness is like major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, bipolar, schizophrenia. So when you see the abbreviation SMI, that's what that means. That so let me pull up my note. It says that exercise significantly decreased anxiety symptoms more than control conditions in a moderate effect size. And so they went through a lot of conditions exercise conditions with people that had specifically anxiety disorders, and was trying to find a correlation between exercise and anxiety improvement. What this bottom middle article in the Preventative Medicine was talking about motivation in patients with severe mental illness. And what this shows is that the more severe the mental illness, the less intrinsic motivation they have. And we all know that unmotivated patients are less likely to put in the effort to get better. And so, this just goes to prove something that we kind of already knew, but in a more scientific way. And so we really have to help patients understand, or parents understand, that they're going to need a lot more outside encouragement to do some of the things that we're asking them to do, because their mental illness is impacting their motivation. All right. So another part of the body that I want to touch on is diet and supplements. So I like this quote from Hippocrates: "Let thy food be thy medicine, and thy medicine be thy food." So some deficiencies that we need to look into when we're working someone up with mental illness. So B12 deficiencies, B6 deficiencies are associated with depression. Folate and zinc can affect cognitive, or can affect the cognition, and have shown to have cognitive declines and irritability. So there's things, so especially kids that have a lot of motility issues, whether it is just irritable bowel syndrome, will they have Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, or plethora of many other GI conditions. We should be on the lookout for deficiencies or something that could be potentially causing them to not have all the nutrients that they are needing. The thing that goes hand in hand is if they're having an unhealthy gut, they also may not be producing enough serotonin, because serotonin is actually produced, or 95% of it is produced in the gut. And so if we have an unhealthy gut, we're going to be leading to reduced amount of serotonin production. And we all know the serotonin's role in mood and physiological functions. So it's also involved in pain perception as well. Another important thing to keep in mind is fatty acid, omega-3 fatty acids. So omega-3 fatty acids specifically have shown to have a link to depression. Some of them, some research has shown that there may be some link with ADHD as well. The problem here in our Western culture is that we have a diet rich in omega-6 fatty acid, but low in omega-3s. And so if they're not willing to change the diet to incorporate more fish, lean beef, let's see what, a couple, some other things, then they may need supplementation of fatty acids, specifically the omega-3 fatty acid. So keep that in mind that, you know, and the biggest thing I see this is in autistic patients is they have a very limited and restricted diet. They just really restrict the variety of food that they have. And it's not necessarily an autism. It happens throughout the spectrum of development. So it's just keep in mind that make sure that kids are having a well-balanced diet. Another thing to keep in mind is carbohydrates. So there's been some studies showing that refined carbohydrates and sugars have a detrimental effect on psychological well-being. They actually did a study where they took healthy, and this was a college-age students, that they took mentally healthy volunteers, put them on a high carbohydrate diet, and then tested them. The post-test showed that they're now were showing signs of depression and anxiety. And this was just from having a higher carbohydrate, refined carbohydrates in their diet. So keep these things in mind as you're seeing these kiddos in clinic with gut problems, with picky eating. Those things are things that we need to be checking on as well. So this, take a minute to look at this. This shows the connection between all of this. So I'll give you, 15, 20 seconds to just kind of look over this real quick. All right, so the next thing that I want to talk about as part of the body is sleep. Sleep is super, super critical for these kiddos. It's one of the first things, or that's one of my main things I address in kids, especially teenagers or young kids that have access to electronics after bedtime. If they have TVs in their rooms, phones in the room, gaming systems in their room, whatever it is that they have, if they're not sleeping enough, they're more likely to have a mood disorder. And so the Sleep Foundation, so this, I got some of this information from there. So sufficient sleep, especially REM sleep, is important for facilitating the processing of emotional information. And so during sleep, the brain works to evaluate and remember thoughts and memories. And so and if it's processing it in a positive emotional way, if they're not getting enough sleep, they may not be getting enough of that processing, and that could skew how they remember things. So it's a very important that we're getting these kids good quality sleep. And we know on average, and then granted, this is not specific to children and adolescents, as this is that around 75% of depressed people show symptoms of insomnia. Now, traditionally, I always thought, and many other people did too, that sleep problems were seen as a consequence of depression. I mean, that is one of the criteria for major depressive disorder is sleep impairment. But we're seeing more and more evidence showing that it is the poor sleep that can induce or exacerbate depression. I've seen it plenty of times where poor sleep can induce a manic episode in adults. And so I'd always try to focus on them making sure that they had a good schedule of sleep, waking up at the same time in the morning. And it actually shows that having the morning wake up time is more important than the going to sleep time, um, as far as insomnia goes, and in kids. So I know we do see less mental health conditions during the summer, but that's not because they're sleeping in. That's just because of the stress of school, that we're seeing less of. So we do need to make sure that these kids do not go off the deep end with their sleep, staying up until 2, 3 in the morning and then sleeping in until noon. They really do need to have good, healthy sleep throughout the summer, over the weekends. We do not recommend that they that they be staying up super late on the weekends and sleeping in, and then having to try to correct that on Monday. So we all know that sleeping less over the weekend will lead to a more difficult work for us on Monday. We've all had call weekends. We've all had, busy weekends, and then Monday we're just drained. But imagine doing that chronically. And so we really do need to help parents understand that these kids need to have bedtimes, that they need to not have um, electronic devices, that they have good sleep hygiene, which we'll talk a little bit more here later. So healthy sleep habits, this is really where I want to focus. So kind of already went down this road, having a set bedtime and maintaining a good sleep schedule. If kids have a hard time falling asleep at night, they need to find ways to wind down, such as relaxation techniques, bedtime stories, reading in their own, anything to help them wind down. They shouldn't be in an intense video game where they're battling or doing whatever, and then they turn it off and expect to fall asleep quickly. It's just not realistic. So we really do need to be cutting off electronics around an hour before sleep time. Of course, we all know we should be avoiding caffeine. And I've already mentioned that we need to put electronics away an hour or more before bed, but maybe dimming the lights even so in the evening for these kiddos who are really having trouble falling asleep. And back to the exercise, they do need to get regular exercise, and they need natural light exposure. And it's actually preferable that they get it in the morning. So early morning bright light exposure, it alone is sorry, I said that wrong. Early morning light exposure is a treatment itself for insomnia. So, you know, that's why we don't want these kids waking up at noon. They've already missed that whole morning to be getting exposure to sunlight. And then, of course, the other things which are we all commonly know, but sometimes we forget to make sure, is we got to make sure that there's mattresses and lumpy and springs were poking out or whatever, and that they just have a good, comfortable environment. It's not too hot. I cannot sleep at my mother's house. She likes it way too warm for me. I cannot sleep very well at my mother's house. She keeps it like 85. It's terrible. But so these kids, we need to make sure that some of these things are happening, like blocking out excessive light, maybe having a sound machine if they're going to bed, but yet adults in the house are still up doing activities. Maybe they need a sound machine to block out some of that sound, so it's less stimulating, less, um, you know, so that they're not being awoken after they're starting to fall asleep. Another thing that's come up recently in my clinic is younger kids getting up in the night and getting in bed with parents. That's not good for many different reasons. It's not good for the parents' quality of sleep, and it's not good for the child's quality of sleep. So starting at a young age, that needs to be addressed, is sleeping in their own bed. And I know many pediatricians address that frequently. I just want to remind you that young kids need to be taught to sleep in their own beds, and being able to self-soothe if they wake up and they're a little scared of the dark or they've had a bad dream. They need to learn to self-soothe so that they can fall back asleep quicker, but then also not wake up their parents, so their parents aren't sleep deprived and more grouchy and irritable the next day, to leading to potential fights or whatever the next day. So I just want to reiterate all those good, important sleep tips. Here's two different handouts that I use. The one on the left is more geared towards adults, mostly because it talks about different extra things. The one on the right is specifically for kids. So these are ones that are free to get. You can use them in your practice. If you need the links to them, I can get those to you. But just have these on hand and be able to give them out anytime you're having this conversation, so that whatever you say, they can take home with them. So like I said, these are just some ones that I personally use. There's many other formats out there. Get the one that you like, the one that you feel more comfortable with, but I think it's a good idea to have some handouts. All right, now let's transition to the mind. And so back to this Dr. Resch, he had a good article that I read, so that's why I'm quoting him. We know people have the innate ability to heal themselves by the way they think, act, and make choices, and therapy encourages the natural tendency towards healing. All right, so let's dive into that. So CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, that's the main type of treatment that we're sending these young kids to do. So it's the connection between feelings, thoughts, and behaviors. And so that's the CBT triangle. And so let's get a little bit deeper into that. All right, so the three basic principles of CBT are core beliefs. Now, core beliefs are informed by our childhood experiences. They're deeply rooted in how we view ourselves, our environment, and the future, along with our beliefs about these factors. So what is a core belief? A common example is, I am a failure. I am this, I am that. You know, it shows what they truly believe themselves to be. You know, that's opposed to, yeah, I make mistakes, but I can learn and I can grow. You know, that's not saying that they're a failure at everything, but that they can learn and grow. And so we hear this, and it's sometimes, if we're not really keyed in, we may miss some of these things. So we kind of have to be a little bit more attentive when we're talking to them and they're starting to say some of those things about themselves. Now, dysfunctional assumptions, or what I was taught to call them, is cognitive distortions. And so we hold on to this more negative view than positive. And they're kind of it's an irrational thought pattern that distorts, and that's what I learned to call them cognitive distortions, because they distort our perception of reality. So a few examples of these are overgeneralizations. They'll focus on a single event or negative evidence and just overuse that to prove their own core belief or their own way of thinking. They can jump to conclusions, call this mind reading or fortune telling. Even I just recently had a conversation with my daughter. She was saying something. She was, you know, having a moment, and she was just saying, "Oh, I just know that these friends really don't like me." I'm like, that's mind reading. You know, how do you know what these people are thinking about you? So Catastrophizing is another big thing. They just take one thing and blow it up, and it's everything hinged on this one event that now they can't recover from. So these will pop up and you'll see them or hear them, and you kind of stay attuned to that. Automatic negative thoughts. We all have automatic thoughts that pop into our head. Some are good, some are bad, but some people, and these kids that we're talking about, often get into a habit of them being more negative than positive. Saying, I can't do this. I'm going to go to this thing. It's not going to be any fun. I'm not going to talk to anybody, you know, lots of different things will pop up. And so these are all, and if they're all negative, then the outcome will also be negative for them. If they go in thinking something's going to be bad, it's more than likely it's going to be bad. So their thought is going to shape their future. And so these are the kind of the three basic principles of CBT. And I'm not wanting you to do CBT. That's not your job. It's not your role to be the therapist. But what you can do is you can use some of these brief therapeutic interventions. If you hear one of these things, if you hear a core belief, a negative core belief, you can catch it and help them correct it. Don't let them think that you're okay with them getting away with it. So if they say, oh, I'm this, I'm a failure, take the time, say, stop. No, you're not a failure. You may have not done well on this certain thing, but we have other evidence that you've done well in these other areas. You can bring those up. You can call them out, I think, is an important to have that you can do in your office. Just if you're hearing some of these things, call them out on it and help them learn, help them not continue to do that. And so just offer that support, offer reassurance, be there. I mean, I don't remember. I know I looked it up at one time a long time ago that the amount of kids that stayed with the same pediatrician throughout their childhood, and it was a rather high number. And so you're going to be seeing these kids for a rather long time, more than likely. So you'll continue to help them throughout the years. And so if you do know that they're in therapy, then check on their progress. Hey, how's it going? How's your relationship with this person? There's always the principle of good fit. Not all patient therapists are going to be able to mesh and fit personality-wise. And it's actually, on average, it does take 3 therapists before you find a good fit. So just because they didn't like the first person, or encourage them, hey, we all have personality conflicts, let's find another one, and help the parents understand that they do, that's a thing, and that could have just been the personality conflict as opposed to the child not being able to do therapy. And then another thing I like to do is ask them to show me or tell me what they are learning in therapy. So, and then if you have a minute, say, hey, can you show me that thing? Can you show me this deep breathing exercise or this 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, whatever it is that example that they're giving you, have them talk about it, have them kind of teach you about it. And so that not only will help you build rapport, but also help them as well. Like I said, that's really all we're hoping that you can do, because we're not expecting you to be a therapist. So here's some more handouts. As you can tell, apparently I really like handouts. This relaxation one, I think it's a 13-page one, something like that, and it has lots of different activities. When I hand these out, I tell the parents, say, this is homework from me for the whole family to do. And these skills, I always say, it's like either a sport or any other skill. You have to practice them before you need them. You can't go out and expect to play in a basketball game never having played basketball before, or whatever. You can't expect to compete in an online game and expect to do well if you've never tried before. So I have them go through these things as a family. And so when the parent sees the child struggling, they can't just say, oh, hey, do this or that. They say, hey, let's do this together. Let's go over this activity. And then you know which one the kid likes more than the other. So the parents really get engaged if you're having them do with it. And there's just some other, these are just other examples of handouts that you can have that kind of give some more information. Another thing that I like to talk about are self-help books. Now this one on the right, the What to Do, there's several different What to Do books. There's ones that are When You Worry Too Much, that are for generalized anxiety disorder, Too Shy for social anxiety, Grumble Too Much is for overcoming negativity, Mistakes Make You Quake, that's for perfectionism, When Your Brain Gets Stuck, that's for OCD, When Your Temper Flares, of course, that's for anger problems. So, and then there's lots of different books out there. And then what I tell parents about books are they're most all teaching the same principles. It's just kind of the way they're doing it and what visuals they're using, what story they use to teach that principle. So they're all going to teach the same information. Just find one that you think, you can read reviews, or if they like to do coloring, like here's a one that's got lots of different coloring and different doodling that you can do along with it. So all these are relatively good books, just depending on how it's taught. So I always recommend that the parents engage and help them do these as well. Now, these What to Do, those are for the younger kids, and some of them will require parent involvement in some of the activities. And I actually have a stack of books that I just keep on my desk so I can show them what I'm talking about. So those are just some examples of books that we can use. For more resources, these are the websites that I give parents to be able to go to. So top left one is NAMI, National Alliance for Mental Illness. The top right, I believe, is that's the CDC. The bottom right one is the Mental First Aid, and then the bottom left one is healthyplace.com. So all of these are specifically for mental health, and they all have different. They have it for patients, for parents, for kids, so they all have different things. So they're really good resources. So these are some online resources that you can give to the families. So the next part of the body as a unit is the spirit. So we want to foster good social connections. School provides number one for most kids. It's just putting yourself in a public place where you're bound to meet other people. Kids are always changing friendships kind of based on who's in their class, who they're seeing the most, who they're hanging out the most. It's becoming with social media, it's becoming that they're able to hold on to friends longer. I know when we didn't have social media, your friends really did. It was who was in your class and who you did assignments with and stuff like that. So, but now with social media, you can talk with anybody whenever you want, even if they don't even live in the same state anymore. So us older practitioners have to keep in mind that kids staying connected in different ways. Number two is they need to be engaging in group activities with others that are doing the same thing that they like. So if they really like art, they need to be in an art club or maybe taking an art class at the community center or whatever it is. If they like theater, if they like games, if they're like anime, there's anime clubs. There's clubs for almost just about anything nowadays. And so really just them joining and being part of that club, they will help foster these good social connections. Say they're already involved in stuff and they feel like they're an outsider, then that's when they need to be encouraged to get to know their already friends better, or their family members better, taking more time with their parents, have the parents spend more time with their kids on one-on-one, take them out specifically to get to know them. They also need to develop a better relationship with themselves. So granted, this is going to be for the older kids. So they need to take the time to know, what do they really like? What do they really enjoy? Where do they want their future to go? So they need to spend some introspective time getting to know themselves so that they can know what to kind of plan for, and what they think might, sorry, having a twisted tongue, that they will know themselves better so that they know what they do like and don't like. This is a big thing I try to emphasize with my daughter. She's got some social anxiety. So it's like, you need to take the initiative with your friends. If you don't think your friends like you, they're not including you, you invite your friends to do something. And that goes for parents. Make the parents help their kid make, for lack of a term, a play date, say, hey, get a hold of their, say, hey, get Johnny's phone number, or Johnny's parents' phone number, so I can text them and they can come over, and then get to know your friend's parents so that y'all can get together and help them take the initiative of becoming friends with the other people. Another important aspect is a spiritual connection. Now, whether that is through a specific organized religious institution, or just creating a spiritual connection with the creator, with their ancestors, with Mother Earth, whatever it is, but getting some kind of a connection with something beyond themselves and a higher power. And a lot of times they can do that even through service programs. So, a lot of service or community service is oriented through some kind of spiritual connection, either a religious one or just fostering these a good community. And so all those kind of will interplay in helping them make social connections. I've suggested many times that volunteering is a great way to get into those things. If they really like animals, they can volunteer at the shelter. If they want, to feed the hungry, we have the food banks that they can do. There's food pantries at certain places. So there's lots of different opportunities to serve and get outside themselves, get outside their own thinking, and see that other people may be suffering as well. So that's kind of the overview of the spirit and how to foster good social connections. So how do we implement these into your practice, and how do we develop self-treatment plans? So we need to be good educators, particularly with people with mental illness, because we already learned that they have a harder time to have that intrinsic motivation, but they're at higher risk for developing other medical comorbidities. So what are some of the barriers and facilitators for education? Let's go through a couple of those. So here's some of the barriers. Information overload. I've probably done that today. I'm guilty of my own presentation. So we need to get away from some of the big words, the jargons. I know we're all pretty good about trying to talk on a patient level, but then also not having approaches to the same approach to everyone. Not everyone is going to respond well to this medication. Not everyone needs to go see this therapy group, So try to meet the individual on their level, and fostering a good communication back and forth. We give them all this information and you have a 15-minute visit. When are they going to have a chance to talk? When are they going to have a chance to communicate back and show that they understand? So trying to allow for more communication time. I wish this thought just came to mind. I remember reading a study, and I think it was in medical school that they taught this to us, that a doctor that stands versus a doctor that sits, even though the doctor that's sitting is spending less time in the room, the patients felt like it was a longer visit than if they were standing. So take the time to get down on their level, meet them eye to eye. I know we have a lot of stuff we have to do in the computer. Electronic medical records have made our lives harder, not easier. And that's just something that we're going to have to work on, myself included. So what are some facilitators? Demonstrating interest and establishing trust. So that's what we call rapport, building that patient rapport, just letting them know that you remember certain things about them, what they're doing in school. So I always kind of keep a one-liner about what their interests are and what they're going on in their school. If they're in a sport or an activity or extracurricular thing, if they have pets or whatnot, so that because I'm not going to remember those details. You have too many patients to remember all those details. So if you keep a little bit a one-liner there in the notes, you can refer back to that to ask them and shows them that you care. Already talked about adapting to their learning style and using age-appropriate education materials. And then asking the patient to kind of rehash what you explained to them in their own words to make sure that they understood it. And then for us, we really need to help educate the parents on what the plan is, what are the needs. I know as they're getting older or as the teen is transitioning to adulthood, they're still going to need some of this help. We want to help that transition, that the parents still know what's going on, while keeping the kids' privacy. But it's really important that they have someone on their team. So there's some ways to be a good facilitator of education. So I found these online from healthline.com. So these are some apps. So our kids love technology. They love apps. So these are some good apps that can be helpful for them. And if the therapist would like to throw in the chat some of their favorite apps or technologies or whatever it is that kids can utilize to help them, I'd appreciate if they would throw those in the chat, so that y'all have all the tools that you could use in your toolbox. So these are just a list of some of the ones that I found online. So how do we create the plan? Like I said, we've already talked about seeing them as the whole person, the connection between the mind, body, and spirit. And then you can use these 5 A's. So let's go over these 5 A's. And these are to assist physicians in providing patient-specific recommendations. So the ask, we have to have, we have to know what is going on. We can't make assumptions. We need to advise them in clear, strong, personalized manner, and then assess if they are willing to make these changes. What level of change are they at? Are they contemplating changes? Are they ready to make these changes? And then go from there. And then we can assist them to either attempt to quit doing such and such or make this change in this area. And we can use handouts, apps, counseling, medications. That's where we're going to assist them. And then we need to arrange follow-up with them. We need to be seeing them as regularly as possible. If it's either in person, video, but I don't know what happened. That's with the slide, with the quit date. I'm not sure what's going on there, but we need to follow them up as soon as we're suggesting these changes that we see them again. So these are the 5 A's model. So this is my conclusion statement that I wanted to make sure that we all understood that treating the whole person and helping them learn the skills of self-healing and regulation, and then we'll help formulate treatment plans, then we'll be practicing medicine at an elevated level that not only brings them peace and joy, but also bring peace and joy to us. So I just wanted to leave some time for some questions or comments, or if anybody had any case questions or whatever, kind of leave the time open for whatever.
Thanks, Dr. Blood. We did have one question that came in the chat, and that was for a link to the handouts. So I suspect that that's something that you and I can connect on afterwards. And if the individuals who are interested in more information on that, they can complete the evaluation at the end of the session through the QR code, or they can email us and we can give them more information on that.
Definitely, we can, I don't have those in my, on top of my head, but I can get those for you.
Terrific. So the apps that you shared, were most of those, are they free apps? Are they ones that have cost involved in them? And do you know that?
Some of them are free, some of them are paid for, so it's just a mix. Yeah,
And Dr.
so,
Johnson, if
oh,
you will go ahead and fill out the evaluation, I'll make sure that you get that list. I can give you I can get you the whole presentation, or Dr. Blood, if you can pull it back up.
yeah, let me.
Yeah, I would appreciate that.
We had a few of them that we put into one of our CPAN newsletters as well, Dr. Blood. And Dr. Johnson, if you want the list of those, if you do, let me know and I can send you those, the names of those apps too, because I think there were a couple in that we didn't have on Dr. Blood's PowerPoint.
Yeah, here's so here, this one, the mood kit costs $7. Talkspace is a subscription. Headspace is also a subscription. This one's free. The Better Stop Suicide. So there's a mix. The I Breathe is free. Mindshift CBT is also free. So it's a mix. So here's a good addiction one for quitting. It's free as well. This other one is a subscription. So there's just different things, you know. And most of them, I mean, some of the membership ones can be a little bit pricey, but if they're just the app themselves, they're relatively cheap.
Thank you for the feedback from both of you.
Yeah, and
What
so
other
this
questions?
presentation does apply to you know, all mental health, all psychiatric treatment, whether it is kids or adult.
You know, Dr. Blood, I thought it was interesting you talk about the sleep component, and it's almost like a chicken and egg situation where does the sleep, you bring
Right.
to light the sleep component related to the depression. Does the depression lead to the sleep? Very interesting.
Right, yeah. So it definitely is. And sometimes, uh, you know, that's where a good history, you know, you got to take into account their history. So when they start having sleep problems, when they first started having mood problems, and kind of trying to find the right root cause, definitely some of the times it's the sleep problem is what we need to address first. And I'm like, we're not doing anything else until we get the sleep fixed. So,
You know, we talk about some of the challenges our families who are of a lower socioeconomic status have with the food deserts and such like that, and we may have stores that have nothing but just carbohydrates. It's hard to get foods that are healthy at a price that's feasible for those families to pay, and yet you talk about the food that can impact the our emotions as well. Just those cheap carbohydrates, the chip, donuts, the
mhm.
soda and such. So, something for to
Macaroni and
definitely for us
ramen,
to
yeah.
think, oh yeah, absolutely.
There's definitely some challenges out there that's why we got to take this individually because some may have this and some may not. So it really just and to know your patient well enough to know what some of those things are.
Absolutely. Great comments, Wiley. Thank you for adding that. We appreciate everybody joining today. Let's go ahead and put up this QR code so you have that to complete your evaluation. Let me share that here. My apologies, I'm having a little bit of challenge here. All righty, there you go. So thank you for joining today. We are certainly open for questions. We've got 5 more minutes here, but I did want to go ahead and put this QR code in here for your evaluation.